Hey, hello, CISA champions. Welcome back to truly what is the final piece of the puzzle, Domain 5, protection of information assets. Domain 5 is going to be a huge topic. So I'm going to split it into multiple parts. This is part 1 of the series. If you've been following along this particular series, I hope you have seen the videos of domains 1 to 4 because those are to be watched in sequence. If you have, well, congratulations to have make it this far. This is the last leg of whatever you are in your CISA prep, and this is ideally, typically I am thinking of designing it about 30 minutes or so because each topic deserves a separate video by itself. I'll try and combine as many topics as I can and to make it more interactive for you so that it will be that last minute push for you for this huge domain, which is 26% of the exam. However, having said that, there are multiple topics. I cannot even list out the number of topics which are there in this domain, so I don't want to take too much of your time. Let's straight away dig into the concepts. There we go. So let us talk about cryptography. Cryptography is one of the most heavily tested domain 5 topics as well as the most difficult. Okay, it is really tough to understand. So I'll try and dumb it down, trying to simplify it as much as possible for you. So when it comes to encryption, you need to know the types, when to use each type of encryption, strengths and weaknesses of each type of encryption. All right, so let us start with the fundamental distinction, which is symmetric versus asymmetric encryption. Symmetric encryption uses the same key for both encryption and decryption. Think of it like a traditional lock and key. The same key that locks the door also unlocks it, right? This is how we use it in our house. Something similar to that happens in the symmetric algorithm. Okay, so there is an algorithm. Typically, this is AES, which is the gold standard for symmetric encryption. AES stands for Advanced Encryption Standard. So you need to know this for the exam, which is coming in at least 2-3 categories. One is AES 128, another is AES 192, AES 256, and so on. These numbers 128, 192, and 256 refer to the key length in bits. Okay, so AES 256 is definitely the strongest and the most probably you can say the approved one for top secret information by the US government. And AES as a technology replaced the older DES, which was data encryption standard, which is now obsolete and insecure. Other symmetric algorithms we might be listening to or hearing about are 3DES, which is triple DES, which is applying 3 DES 3 times. Again, this is all phased out. Then there is blowfish or twofish, again old algorithm, no longer there. Cha-cha 20 is another. This is used in some protocols, but the standard is now become AES 256. Okay, so this is primarily used for bulk data encryption. Okay, whenever you need to encrypt large amounts of data in a very quick manner, you end up using symmetric encryption. So this is like encrypting hard drives, for example. You will use BitLocker, File Vault. All of these technologies or tools, they use AES. Then database encryption. TDE is something which comes to mind. TDE stands for transparent data encryption. Then you have file encryption, which is protecting files at rest. Then VPN tunnels, which is encrypting network traffic. Then backup encryption, and so on. I mean, these are some use cases for symmetric encryption. Basically, as I told you, the biggest strength of symmetric encryption is speed and efficiency. So it is computationally really efficient. It can encrypt gigabytes of data in few seconds. So modern processors have hardware acceleration for AES, make it even more faster. The biggest challenge when it comes to symmetric encryption is key distribution, because both parties need the same key. How can you securely share that key? Because if you send it over the network, it can be intercepted, right? And if you share it in person, that doesn't scale. So this is what is called the key distribution problem. Okay, so this is where there's a concept called out of band or through a separate secure channel. So This is the biggest problem when it comes to symmetric encryption. When it comes to asymmetric encryption, this uses two mathematically related keys, a public key and a private key. So what one key encrypts, only the other key can decrypt. For example, public key can be freely distributed to anyone. It is available for everyone. The private key, on the other hand, must be kept secret and protected. So key algorithms in asymmetric encryption include RSA or Rivest Shamir Edelman, which is the name of the three people who invented this particular algorithm. This is the most widely used asymmetric algorithm, and it uses the key size 2048 bit, which is the minimum, and 4096 bit, which is the strongest as of now available. I mean, of course, there could be other variations. So this is based on mathematical difficulty of factoring large prime numbers, and this is why asymmetric encryption really scores more higher and better than symmetric encryption. I'll tell you all those other why it is better and why it is not so good in the forthcoming discussion. But let us understand that this is mainly used for SSL, TLS, email encryption, code signing, and so on. Another type of asymmetric algorithm is elliptic curve cryptography, or ECC. This is the newer, more efficient algorithm which provides the same security as RSA but much smaller keys, because the more number of keys, the more it requires processing capacity, it requires memory, it requires a lot of resources. So the less number of keys, the better it is. So ECC provides that additional advantage over RSA, where it is more faster, more efficient, especially for mobile devices. It is used for Bitcoin. Use cases include model TLS, then government systems, and so on. So there are others also which probably you can think about. I mean, just know it for the exam, but not really required, because this exam is not going to be this is going to be vendor agnostic rather. So DSA is another digital signature algorithm, primarily for digital signatures, as the name suggests. Then Diffie-Hellman is another kind of algorithm which is for specifically for key exchange, not for encryption. So primary use cases of asymmetric encryption includes key exchange and digital signatures. So this is not meant for bulk data encryption because it's slow, because number of keys are very high. Key exchange also has to be done. So this is, but the advantage is that this will securely exchange symmetric keys over insecure channels also. Um, Authentication is a huge advantage. It solves the key distribution problem, which is the biggest disadvantage of symmetric symmetric algorithms and symmetric encryption. But the trade-off is that, disadvantage is that it is slow, computationally very expensive, especially large keys are involved, so it takes a lot of time. So that is where people have started using the hybrid approach, which is asymmetric for the key exchange and symmetric for the bulk encryption. So we get the best of both worlds. Okay, so this is, as far as exam is concerned, these are the kind of questions which may come. So remember this for the exam. Then let's talk about digital signatures, digital certificates rather, sorry. This is the foundation of trust on the internet. So without certifications, or without these kind of certificates, you cannot trust that whether a website you are visiting is actually who they claim to be. So this is why we need digital certificate. That is, digital certificate is an electronic credential that binds an identity to a public key. So it's like a digital passport. It tells you who you are in the online world. So this certificate is issued and signed by a trusted certificate authority, or the CA, which acts as the trusted third party which vouches for the certificate holder's identity. Okay, so what does it enable? It enables authentication, it enables encryption, it gives you the trust or the confidence, and real world use cases will include HTTPS websites, email encryption, code signing, VPN authentication, and documentation signing, like for example signing digital signatures on PDFs, contracts, and so on. Okay, so very important part for the exam. So what are the components of a digital certificate, which includes the subject name, which is the name or identity of owner, subject public key, in this case Bob, let's say Bob's public key, then the issuer or the certificate authority. Okay, this tells you who is that body which is giving you. Famous certification authorities are DigiCert, Let's Encrypt, VeriSign, Global Sign, Komodo, and so on. So The next one is on validity period. So every certificate is time limited. So they have a defined lifespan with not before date or not after date and not after date. So this typically whenever a validity period is there, let's say for 2 or 3 years, so you have to make sure that this is factored in, because this forces periodic re-verification of the identity so that it doesn't go into the tangent of perpetual identity. It cannot go into that because somebody is hacked and somebody is compromised, that the window is getting limited. That's the whole idea. Then it encourages modern encryption and cryptography standards as well. Okay, so this is as on that. Then serial number is a unique identifier assigned by the CA to this particular certificate. No two certificates can have the same serial number. So uniquely it will identify the certificate. You can track the certificate in the database, and you can revoke specific certificates because you have that ID number and so on. Next is on the CA digital signature, the most important field. This is what makes the entire certificate trustworthy, because the CA creates a digital signature of the certificate using their private key. Okay, so this is very critical because it creates a hash of particular data, that hash is getting encrypted with the CA's private key, and that becomes the digital certificate itself. So your typically how it functions is, your browser receives the certificate, it takes all the certificate fields and hashes them, then it decrypts the CA certificate using the CA's public key. Then if they match, then the certificate is authentic and has not been tampered with. If they do not match, then the certificate has been modified and is fraudulent or tampered with. So this is very critical as far as the exam is concerned. So this is just an overview of how critical this digital certificate is. Revocation methods of digital certificate can include CRL. Okay, so a certificate authority publishes a list of revoked certificate serial numbers, so which clients can download and check the CRL, which is a certification revocation list. Then we have OCSP, which is the online certificate status protocol, which is a real-time query. You can query the serial number of the certificate and see whether it is still valid or not. Then we have OCSP stapling, which is the website itself fetches the OCSP response and staples it to the certificate during the handshake, okay, which happens. So these are some critical points. Some common exam scenarios will include something like, something where certificate has expired, what could have prevented this? Certificate lifecycle management could be the answer. Certificate monitoring and renewal process could be another answer. These kind of options may come in the exam. Okay, so when it comes to digital signatures, this is where cryptography becomes very practical in terms of what digital signatures are. Let us understand that digital signature is a cryptographic mechanism which proves the authenticity and integrity of a message or a document. It is the electronic equivalent of a handwritten signature, but in a far more secure digital manner. So there are three pillars to this. One is the integrity, which proves that the message has not altered since it was signed. Okay, so it creates a hash of the message, and then it compares the hash against that hash. Then we have authenticity. It tells you and proves you who has created or sent the message, so you can verify the identity of the person. And you have non-repudiation, which is the legal property of the whole thing, which is non-repudiation means the signer cannot deny that he has not signed or he has signed, because it will be very clear that he has already been authenticated and he cannot prove otherwise. So that will create a confirmation that he is the person who he is saying he is, and he cannot say otherwise. Okay, so how do digital signatures typically work? The process is simple. Then first you have a creation of the digital signature, which is creating a hash, encrypting that hash, attaching the signature to the message. Then you have the verification process where you decrypt that by using the sender's public key. Then you hash the received message and compare it to two hashes. If they match, then it is okay. If they don't match, then signature is invalid. And we have to understand that digital signature and digital certificate are different. Digital certificate is a credential that binds identity to a public key issued by a CA or a certificate authority, and it contains a public key. Digital signature, on the other hand, is a cryptographic proof attached to a message or a document created by the sender using their private key, and it proves integrity, authentication, and non-repudiation. Alright, very critical for the exam. Okay, let's talk about key management lifecycle. So you can have the strongest encryption algorithm in the world, like AES 256, RSA 4096, but if you manage your keys poorly, all that security will collapse. So what is the key management lifecycle? Which is there are three major phases: generation, distribution, storage, rotation or renewal, and finally destruction or revocation. Key generation happens where cryptographic keys are created. So here randomness is very important, that it should be random. It should not be standard programming. This one should not be predictable. It should be totally unpredictable. This is the whole idea. So keys will be generated using pseudo random functions, or um, if that is there, then it is a critical vulnerability. Okay, so where to generate this kind of keys is using hardware security modules, or HSM. This is best practice for creating high security keys, so it becomes trusted isolated systems. And you will, please don't never ever as an auditor, if you are seeing this, that somebody is trying to generate keys on untrusted or compromised systems, please as an auditor, please don't accept it anymore. Second phase is key distribution, where the key is getting exchanged. It should be securely delivered to the authorized parties. This is of course the hardest problem. And symmetric keys, this is the biggest challenge, where you are using out of band delivery, which means physically you have to go and hand over the key on a USB or in person. It cannot be scalable. Then we have something called key encryption keys, which is KEK, which is using a master key to encrypt and distribute session keys. Again, technically very difficult, but yeah, this is one of the explanations. Asymmetric keys are much more easier because public keys can be freely distributed, but authenticity matters. Okay, private keys are never distributed, generated and kept by the owner only. And this is very important, that interception of keys is very something which you have to look out for. Man in the middle attacks can be there, unauthorized access can be there. So what are the controls for secure distribution? Encryption of keys during the transit, split knowledge, dual control, certificate based authentication, and so on. Okay, then next phase is key storage. This must be keys must be securely stored when not in use. Storage requirements include encryption of stored keys, access controls, principle of least privilege, separation of duties, and so on, and physical security. Like HSM and TPM are two categories on this. HSM is hardware security modules, and TPM is trusted platform modules. Okay, the next phase in our life cycle is on key rotation or renewal. So keys should be periodically changed to limit the exposure limit. So limit the exposure window, crypto analysis resistance. Then we have compliance requirements, which is very critical. Again, many regulations will require periodic key rotation. We have to follow all of these things. The last but not the least, the scenario of number 5, phase 5 in our key management lifecycle is key destruction or revocation. So keys are securely destroyed when no longer required. So end of key lifetime should be looked at. Expired keys should be rotated out. Compromise suspected or confirmed keys should be removed. So employee termination, immediately the key should be again removed as well. System decommissioning, keys should be removed. So cryptographic erasure, zeroization, key deletion from HSM, all of those things has to be checked. Okay, so these are the critical things. CISA champions, we have made it through part 1 of this mega series of CISA domain 5. Let us move on to part 2. If you are following this for the first time, please do thanks for watching, and please do subscribe, like, and comment. This is very critical for you to know that this is part 1 of domain 5, and there is part 2 as well. Please do watch part 2, and multiple parts are being slated to be operational. You will require to watch everything, because this is your best bet at passing the exam in your first attempt or in your next attempt. So please do watch everything, and all the best to you. Happy auditing, happy becoming a CISA champion very soon. All right, all the best and bye.